Yo, what's good, YouTube? What's good? It's Stormy B Man, and I am back welcoming you to Historical Boxing Conversation with Scrapbook Boxing for this Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. And we are back to have another wonderful lecture and discussion on the sport of boxing, our favorite sport. Those of us who are tuned and dialed in with attentiveness, as Scrapbook brings us some more historical boxing conversations. And with no further ado, allow me to introduce the star of the show, Scrapbook Boxing. What's going on with you, Scrap? How you doing this evening? Scrap, you there? Come off of mute if you're there. Scrap, you still on mute?
Stormy, just as I was getting ready to get off mute, phone turned off, so I apologize.
Yeah.
Good evening, my brother. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. I want to thank the chat for giving me their time tonight. And I want to thank a special friend, my brother, Curtis Anderson. It's his birthday today, and I want to wish him a happy birthday. I want to dedicate this show to him, my brother, Curtis Anderson. He's been involved in this game for over 47 years, and he understands this game in and out. And I want to share this conversation with him because it's his birthday, and he deserves that type of love. So shout out to my brother, Curtis Anderson.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Tonight's topic is going to be... Oh, I'm sorry, Tony.
No, I was just agreeing. Yes, sir. That's all I said. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Tonight's topic is about 1938. 1938, one of the greatest years. In fact, in my opinion, was the greatest year for black fighters. And I'm going to explain why. I'm going to go into detail back from 1681 to basically Joe Louis era. So boxing began in 1681. England's heavyweight claimants began from 1719 to 1885. James Biggs, who was the first heavyweight champion, 1719 to 1730. The last bare-knuckle champion of England was Jim Smith when he defeated Charlie Mitchell, 1885 to 1887. Then you would have Jim Smith, who would take on Jake Kilrain. Jake Kilrain would take out Jim Smith, 1887. It would be for the Police Gazette belt. That would be the first time a belt would be presented to a fighter in that fashion, and Fox was the control fighter. He was an ex-fighter, but he was a controlled commissioner of the Police Gazette. Jake Kilrain would take on John O'Sullivan. Fight took place 1889, and it took 7.5 hours to complete. The last bare-knuckle era that took place during that time. John O'Sullivan would take on Jim Corbett. July 7th, 1892. It was the last fight of the Carnival of Champions. It started July 5th to July 6th to July 7th. And John O'Sullivan and Jim Corbett was the last fight on that card. It would be the first bout with gloves. And John O'Sullivan would be knocked out in 21 rounds. The winner took all. John O'Sullivan went home with nothing. June 27th, 1890. George Dixon became the bantamweight champion when he took on Luke Wallace. He would be the first fighter to win a championship overseas. He would be the first athlete to win a championship. He would be the first black fighter to win a championship. And he was bantamweight champion when he defeated Luke Wallace, June 27th, 1890. March 31st, 1891, George Dixon would become the featherweight champion of the world when he took on Kyle McCarthy. Peter Jackson, known as the Black Prince, he would become the colored heavyweight champion when he would take out Joe Godfrey. But then he would last 61 rounds and it would become a draw with Gentleman Jim Corbett, May 21st, 1891. 1804, Bill Richmond would be the first fighter of America. Bill Richmond would be the first trainer of America. Tom Molitor would be the second fighter of America. He would be the first fighter to fight for a championship. Both these men were black fighters. 1810, Tom Molitor would take on Tom Cribb. 33 rounds. Unfortunately, Tom Molyneux would be jobbed in that fight. He would knock out Tom Cribb. But then men would step into the ring. And they would bogart the ring. They would hit him in the back of the head with an iron pipe. They claimed that he had a fistful of pellets. He did not. Time went by. Tom Cribb would recover, and he would win the fight. May 12, 1902, Joe Gans would be the first black fighter of America to win a lightweight championship belt. He would defeat Frank Earn. And Joe Gans would discover not only the 1-2, but he would discover the jab. The colored heavyweight championship would be recognized. Professor Charles C. Hadley, 1876. And it would last until July 20th, 1935. Canadians Larry Gans. You had 20 black fighters that would exchange the titles, totaling 28 times. Sam Langford would have 63 title defenses. He would be a 5-time colored heavyweight champion. Harry Wells, he would take on 22 times, and Joe Jeanette 14 times. Now, Harry Wells would be a 3-time colored heavyweight champion. He would have 34 title defenses. Jack Johnson would be a 1-time colored heavyweight champion. He would defend his title 25 times. He would be the first black heavyweight champion in 1908 when he would take on Noah Brusso, better known as Tommy Burns. June 22nd, 1937, the colored titles would disappear when Joe Louis would become the second black heavyweight champion of the world. The colored light heavyweight championship would be established. Lee Anderson, May 30th, 1921, would take on William Ward. His name was Kid Norfolk. And he would defeat Kid Norfolk. But Kid Norfolk would wind up becoming the colored light heavyweight champion December 20th, 1921, when he would defeat Lee Anderson. Now, Peter Jackson would become the Australian heavyweight champion, as I stated before, as well as the colored heavyweight champion. Now, those who would win the colored heavyweight championship belt would be Sam McVeigh, Peter Jackson, as well as Sam Langford. You had 13 colored world middleweight champions. Harris Blackburrow Martin would be the first one, May 2nd, 1887. The last world colored middleweight champion would be Coco Kid, January 15th, 1943. And he would take on Holman Williams. Charlie Burley would defeat Holman Williams. He fought him 7 times. He would win 3, he would lose 3, and have 1 no contest. But he would defeat him in 1942, and he would become the colored middleweight champion of the world. Panama Joe Gans would defeat Larry Estridge, October 8th, 1920, and Sam Langford would become the colored middleweight champion November 12th, 1907, and when he would defeat young Peter Jackson. Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler, and Joe Butler would also become the colored middleweight champion. You had Jack McVeigh, who was known as the Pride of Harlem, and Harlem Thunderbolt, Harry Smith. These 2 men would meet 1929, and that would be the fight of the year. The World Negro Middleweight Championship would be collaborating with the World Colored Middleweight Championship. That would be the first time that 2 titles would be combined. It was a unification bout between Johnny Banks and James Diversity. And Banks and Diversity would fight in 1877. There would be a disqualification in 9 rounds. And the World Colored Middleweight Championship would now be recognized. Eddie Palmer, September 26, 1912. The Fighting Gorilla, February 15, 1915. Coco Kid, July 26, 1936. Charlie Burley, August 22nd, 1938. He would defeat Holman Williams. Coco Kid, January 11th, 1940. What would these men have in common? They would become the colored welterweight champions of the world. Now, Joe Gans would discover the jab and the 1-2, as I expressed to you before. He became the world lightweight champion May 12, 1902 by knocking out Frank Earn in 1 round. He was champion from 1902 to 1908. He would fight in Fort Earn, Canada. The Barbados Demon, known as the Black Demon, Joe Walcott, would become the world welterweight champion December 8, 1901, defeating Lou Fern in a technical knockout. Theodore Tiger Flowers became the world middleweight champion He defeated Harry Greb, February 26, 1926. December 3rd, 1926, the Toy Bulldog would defeat Theodore Tiger Flowers. That was one of the most corrupt fights during those years. Many thought that Theodore Tiger Flowers had defeated Mickey Walker. Battle in Siki had knocked out Georges Compartier, September 24th, 1922, in Paris, France. Jack Johnson had knocked out Tommy Burns, 14 rounds, December 26, 1908, in Sydney, Australia. Like I said, he would be the first black heavyweight champion of the world. Now, Henry Armstrong, his name was Henry Jackson Jr., born December 12, 1912. He died October 24th, 1988. He was 5 foot 5.5 inches, weighed 121 to 145 pounds. 1937, he fought 27 times, winning 26 by knockout, no losses. I want to compare something for one moment. R.I.P. to him. Edwin Valero had 27-0 with 27 knockouts. But it took him 8 years to accomplish that, from 2002 to 2010. Henry Armstrong accomplished that in 1 year. The only man he didn't knock out was a guy by the name of Alvy Spaulding, and he would knock him out twice in 1944. Henry Armstrong would knock out Peter Cerrone in 6 rounds at the New York Madison Square Garden, and he would become the first black featherweight champion of America. Before him, you had Kid Chocolate, but he was from Cuba. Before him, you had George Dixon, but he was from Canada. But Henry Armstrong would be the first black American featherweight champion of the world. And he did it at the Mecca in New York's Madison Square Garden. He would be the only black fighter, the third black fighter, to make that accomplishment. First, you had Tiger Flowers, who defeated Harry Greb, 1926. And then you would have John Henry Lewis, who would defeat Bob Owen in 1935. And now you would have Henry Armstrong, 2 years later, would accomplish that feat. What a remarkable achievement by Henry Armstrong. He would also become the world welterweight champion. He would out-hustle Chicago's Bonnie Ross, the New York's Madison Square Garden Bowl. The fight took place May 31st, 1938. It would go the distance, and Henry Armstrong would carry Bonnie Ross. But he would beat him to a pulp. Bonnie Ross would say that was the toughest fight that he's ever been in, regardless of how long he's been in that ring. See, Henry Armstrong would look at your feet, and he would place you in a position where he wanted you to go, using his right elbow, using his head for position. And he would angle you. He would walk you all over that ring, body and head. And he did it for the full 15 rounds. So much so that he would become the first fighter and only fighter to win 3 championships in 3 different divisions. And he did it against a fighter by the name of Lou Ambers. Lou Ambers was some fighter himself. Being in the ring with Tony Canzanera, he would lose his title to Lou Jenkins, 1940. But Henry Armstrong would swallow 5 pints of blood in the last 5 rounds because he did not want the referee to stop that fight. The ring was soaking wet with blood. And he was that determined to win a title. Why was this important? Because Bonnie Ross had also won 3 titles. One was not recognized. Henry Armstrong's was. They both had the same manager. His name was Eddie Mead. Eddie Mead was that determined to make sure that he ruled the division. Why? Because Joe Louis would become the second black heavyweight champion in boxing history when he would take out James Braddock and Comiskey Park. He would knock him out in 8 rounds. That was exciting because Joe Louis had lost for the first time in his career in New York's Yankee Stadium against Max Schmeling, And he'd be knocked out in 12 rounds. Joe Louis was one of the greatest heavyweights, and he is the premier fighter in this conversation. But Henry Armstrong would also fight fighters such as Perfecto Lopez and Midget War Guys, Everett Whitemeyer and Paul Jr., Lou Jenkins, and Baby Arizmenzi. Fought Baby Arizmenzi 6 times. He won 3, Arizmenzi won 3. He fought Arizmenzi from the featherweight division all the way to the welterweight division in 1939 when he would give baby Arizmenzi an opportunity to win that title. But in 1932, baby Arizmenzi would pick up the world featherweight champion that was recognized in Mexico and California. Henry Armstrong in 35. He would become the Mexican in California recognition of the featherweight championship of the world. He become a champion. That is not discussed today. For what reason, I don't know why. But he also be in the ring with a fighter by the name of Willie Joyce. Fought him twice. Willie Joyce was in the ring with Ike Williams 3 times. 4 times total, but he would defeat him 3 times. That's an accomplishment yet to be understood and recognized and or appreciated. He'd be in the ring with Luther Slugger White as well as Al Bunny Davis. Mike Belois, who had a brother by the name of Steve Belois. Mike Belois was known as the Bronx Spider. He could fight. Tippy Larkin from New Jersey. Had the pleasure of meeting Tippy Larkin, and he was, I can say personally, an honor to me. He was something else. He could fight. And the thing about it, Bojack would be a fighter that would have 21 main event bouts in New York's Madison Square Garden. Number 2 would be Tippy Larkin. And Bojack had knocked out Tippy Larkin in 3 rounds to become the lightweight champion of the world for the New York SAC. But Henry Armstrong would also be in the ring with Stefano Garcia. Quickly about that fight, Garcia was a commodity. He was from the Philippines. And he had promised a bout with Ken Overland. It was a contract that he couldn't get out. But he also had an agreement with Eddie Meade for Henry Armstrong to get a title shot himself. It was for the middleweight division, the New York SAC, as well as the NBA. But the New York SAC could not be recognized because they wanted to make sure that Henry Armstrong did not win that fight. So they made it a 10-round bout. The New York SAC didn't recognize a 10-round bout, so they had to go to California. And to show you how corrupt that fight was, that they put a referee in there to make sure that they didn't allow Henry Armstrong to win because he disqualified Henry Armstrong for 5 rounds. Took 5 rounds away from Henry Armstrong. He disqualified 5 rounds away from Henry Armstrong. Half of 10 is 5, which means it could only be a draw. He couldn't say that Henry Armstrong lost, so he made it a draw. He never announced who won or lost. He jetted out of the ring. They found him on a corner outside of the arena trying to catch a cab. His name was George Blake. He was a trainer for fighters such as Tony Cantaneri and others back in the days. But that was a corruptive situation and or circumstance, and it is in boxing law in history. Henry Armstrong would also be in the ring with Juan Zorrilla. Juan Zorrilla was the NBA lightweight champion. He would lose his title in Mexico City, being knocked out in 2 rounds by Ike Williams. And that fight was something else because Ike Williams could not celebrate his victory in the ring, as Marvin Hagler couldn't with Alan Minter. You see, Ike Williams had to run out of the ring. He was being chased out of the ring with half-eaten sandwiches and soda bottles and popcorn. They threw everything in the kitchen sink at Ike Williams as they threw everything in the kitchen sink at Marvelous Marvin Hagler. But Frankie Click would be another opponent of Henry Armstrong. He was the champion, as well as Bojack and Bellamy Ross, Petey Cherone and Chalky Wright, Ray Robinson. Henry Armstrong was in the ring with all of them. Monday, February 15th, he would lose to Bobby Becker. 1932 Los Angeles Games in the Olympic trials. And he'd be tutored by Harry Wiley Sr., who was yet not in the Hall of Fame. Harry Wiley Sr. would later on become one of the greatest trainers in my observation, as well as Curtis Anderson's and many others of all time. Why? Because he was the trainer of the great Walker Smitty, a.k.a. Sugar Ray Robinson. Would also be training fighters such as Sammy Mandel, Danny Cox, Louis Spider Valentine, George Godfrey, and many, many others. 1936, Henry Armstrong would win the World Featherweight Championship, and he'd be recognized. And I want to overemphasize this as the Mexican in California featherweight champion. How big was that? That was huge. because he was a world champion. It was only recognized in 2 states. But when you look at it for what it is, Henry Armstrong accomplished more than the average fighter. And why he's important. Because for the first time, you would have a black featherweight, a black lightweight, and a black welterweight at the exact same time. And he did it in 9 months. I want you to let that sink in. That was the most phenomenal achievement up to this date by any other fighter in boxing history. And it went from featherweight to welterweight back down to lightweight. That hasn't been done. The only person that would do something close to that would be Bob Fitzsimmons. Bob Fitzsimmons would become the middleweight champion when he took on Jack Dempsey Non-Prevail. Then he would become a heavyweight champion when he took on Gentleman Jim Corbett. And it was known as the pelvic punch, Carson City, knocked him out in 14 rounds. But then he would jump back down to the light heavyweight championship. And he would take on George Gardner. But that couldn't be achieved as well as Henry Armstrong. Because Henry Armstrong defended his welterweight championship crown 19 times. John Henry Lewis was born May 1st, 1914 in Los Angeles, California. He died April 19th, 1974 in Berkeley, California. He stood 5 foot 11 inches, weighed 161 to 190 pounds. He had a record of 93 wins, 8 losses, and 54 knockouts. Fought from January 30th, 1931 to January 25th, 1939. Why is this impressive? Because John Henry Lewis would be the second black fighter to win a light heavyweight championship belt. But guess what? He was the first black light heavyweight champion of America. Balansiki was from Africa. John Henry Lewis was from America. And this was a big deal at that time. I'll tie it all up at the end of this conversation. John Henry Lewis began boxing as a welterweight. July 1st, 1931, he defeated Lloyd Phillip. He won a USA Arizona State Middleweight Championship. Faced James J. Braddock on September 21st, 1932. 10 rounds at the Civic Auditorium in San Francisco, California. He defeated Willie Reddish out of Philadelphia, June 29th, 1937. And Willie Reddish was the trainer for the 1984 featherweight champion who would win a gold medal. His name is Meldrick Taylor. He was also the trainer for his brother Eldrick Taylor. They were twin brothers. But Meldrick would turn professional. And he would become a champion under the tutelage of Willie Reddish. And Willie Reddish came from the school of the shoulder roll, as did Dave Holly, who was the king of the shoulder roll. You also had a fighter by the name of Georgie Benton, as well as a very, very good fighter by the name of Willie Reddish. St. Louis Arena, he would become a historian. October 31st, 1935. And that's when John Henry Lewis would defeat Bob Olin. It didn't happen until 13 years after Balansiki, who was the first black light heavyweight champion in boxing history. John Henry Lewis would also take on Bob Goodwin and Al Gaynor, as well as Al Ator. Now, the problem with John Henry Lewis, he would be stripped of his title, New York SAG, because he didn't defend his title against Tiger Jack Fox. And the reason why he didn't defend his title against Tiger Jack Fox was because the doctor had made a recommendation to the commissioner that he doesn't fight. Why? Because he didn't pass an eye examination test. You see, he pretended he could see out of his right eye for 5 fights, and he could not do so. And the fight doctor had played a trick on him, and he didn't pass the test, so he did not recognize the fact that he could fight. So he made a recommendation to the commissioner. And for that reason, it did not allow him to fight his mandatory, who was Tiger Jack Fox. And that reason they would strip him from his title. He still had the NBA. And would take on Al Gaynor, New Haven, Connecticut. And he would defeat him. But he realized himself that he couldn't see anymore. And he asked his good friend, Joe Louis, for an opportunity at the shot at the heavyweight championship belt. His fight took place January 1939. He be stretched the New York Madison Square Garden in one round because Joe Louis didn't want to hurt him. He'd rather given him the money. But the promoter Mike Jacobs wouldn't go for that because he wouldn't get a piece of the pot. January 25th, 1929, New York's Madison Square Garden. He was KO'd by Joe Louis. Being in the ring with Bob Olin and Lynn Harvey, Red Berman and Jim Broderick, Eddie Sims and Noah Violet Ray, Maxie Rosenblum, and Joe Louis. Now, Joe Louis was known as the Brown Bomber. He was born May 13th, 1914 in Lafayette, Alabama. He died April 12th, 1981 in Las Vegas, Nevada. He stood 6'1.5" weighed 188 to 218 pounds. He had a record of 50 wins, 4 losses, 43 knockouts as an amateur. He would win the AAU National Light Heavyweight Championship belt. He had 43 knockouts in the first 22 professional bouts. He was Ring Fighter of the Year in 1938. By the way, Henry Armstrong was Ring Fighter of the Year of 1937, the year that he would make that a tremendous accomplishment with 27 fights, winning 26 by knockout, not losing at all, plus picking up a title, plus being the first one of his ethnicity in that same country, and being the third man to win it in Madison Square Garden. But Joe Louis was something else. He would face Primo Carnera June 25th in the Bronx, New York, knocking him out in 6 rounds. Max Baer September 24th, 1935 in the Bronx, New York, knocking him out in 4 rounds. Max Schmeling June 19th, 1936, he himself would be stopped in the 12th round. But he would face Jack Sharkey August 18th, 1936 in the Bronx, New York, New York's Yankee Stadium. And that was very impressive. Jack Sharkey would become the heavyweight champion in 1932 when he would defeat Max Schmeling. You see, he fought Max Schmeling in 1930, and it was claimed to be a low blow. And Jack Sharkey, to his credit, was the first fighter, along with Tommy Loughran, was set up the tournament in 1928 when Gene Tunney would retire. His last fight was a guy by the name of Tom Heaney from New Zealand. I'm speaking of Gene Tunney. And he would give up the belt. And a recognition of that time would be Jack Sharkey and Tommy Loughran, who was known as the Philly Phantom. He was the light heavyweight champion. He would give up the title in order to participate in the tournament. So Jack Sharkey was the goods. And I was very impressive knockout by Joe Louis in 2 rounds because he was knocked out himself by Max Schmeling in 12 rounds in 1936. On June 22nd, 1937, Chicago's Comiskey Park, he would knock out Jim Broderick in the 8th round. And for the first time in Harlem, Detroit, Chicago, and all the major cities, they would have a new black heavyweight champion to be proud of, to take a look at and see what their accomplishments could be. Take a look at their kids and say, it could be done. Here's a man who went through it all. But that's not why we're having the topic of this discussion. The reason why we're talking about this, because Henry Armstrong was the featherweight champion. He was a lightweight champion. He was a welterweight champion. John Henry Lewis was the light heavyweight champion. And Joe Louis was the heavyweight champion of the world. All black fighters. Never been done in history. But I got one more for you. In 1938, Coco Kid became the color welterweight champion when he would defeat young Peter Jackson. And he would be recognized as an official colored welterweight champion when he took on Eddie Palmer. But here's the thing. Although Coco Kid is my number 3 black murderers role fighter. But Coco Kid was from Puerto Rico. Charlie Burley would defeat Coco Kid, and he would become the colored welterweight champion of the world. Look at what you had. Look at what the accomplishments were at that time. Imagine you were in that time with all of the discriminations and all of the lack of opportunities that you would have, and you had no one to look up to see if you can accomplish something. And you take a look at those faces. You take a look at those names. You take a look at the ethnicity at the time when you needed it most. And you had one man who had three of them. One man who had one and another man who had one. And what was victorious for Joe Louis was that he would take it from a man who would rob him for 10% for the rest of his life. But also that same year, 1938, he would make the biggest redemption in any weight class, in any era, in my opinion, any sport, when he defeated Max Schmeling. 1938, June 22nd of that year, New York's Yankee Stadium. Referee was Arthur Donovan. He was called into the New York SAC Commission's office, and he was told, God damn it, you don't stop that fight. What happened? I don't give a damn. Both men stretched out. You don't stop the damn fight. We cannot afford a war. You see, in 1936, after Joe Louis was stretched out for Max Schmeling, the Olympics would be in Berlin, Germany. And Adolf Hitler was sitting right there on his throne, licking his chops. And he would have to swallow the fact that Jesse Owens would pick up 4 gold medals. Max Schmeling was carried back to Germany after the victory of Joe Louis on a Hindenburg. And that he couldn't stand. That he wouldn't tolerate. He would call in Max Schmeling into his chambers as Joe Louis is called in on the White House lawn by Franklin D. Roosevelt. Both men were told, you don't lose this fight. One was told, you can't not only win, you have to knock him out. If you win, it doesn't count. The pressure was on Joe Louis more than any other athlete till this day in history. And he accomplished the goal that many wish they could accomplish. Here's a young man who was a 12-year-old in the 3rd grade, didn't have his father, didn't have much to look forward to. And he progressed in life to the extent of becoming the 2nd black heavyweight champion of the world. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation. That's why it's important to study your history. That's why it's important to understand greatness when you see it. Because there are men out there who have accomplished such greatness. And when you hear them being compared to fighters who didn't put half the work in, it's sickening, and it cannot be tolerated to be respected. Their legends are supposed to be accomplishments to look forward to try to achieve better than that, not to degrade their accomplishments. And this is what I see many times. But 3 fighters, Henry Armstrong, John Henry Lewis, and Joe Louis, had said something that will never be accomplished again. Shout out to Charlie Burley for his accomplishments. And I just want to put a footnote with Charlie Burley. He would become the California light heavyweight champion, when he would defeat Jack Chase. Jack Chase would defeat a fighter by the name of Watson Jones. And Charlie Burley. And I'm going to discuss this on another conversation. But there's rumors about the Charlie Burley and Ray Robinson. I'll save that for the next conversation that I have with you. Because I know the real story. I spoke with both men. So happy birthday to my brother Curtis Anderson. Dedicated to you. Stormy B, man. Any questions? Let's open up the mic.
Yes, sir. That's excellent information there, Scrap. I really appreciate the way that you bring that, and you covered so many fighters in such a short amount of time. I have a question to lead it off. And chat, we are now going to go to questions for any of you that would like to write questions into the chat, and Scrap will answer them for you. Scrap, in your honest opinion, how good was Henry Armstrong?
Henry Armstrong, I have ranked number 4 as the greatest fighter in boxing history. Why? He had several names in his career. He became Millie Jackson, 1932, when he went to try out for the LA Games, the Olympic Games that took place in Los Angeles in 1932. He didn't win that fight. He had the tutelage of Harry Wiley Sr. And the fighter he lost to was a fighter by the name of Bobby Decker. And the reason why he didn't win that fight, because at that time, the style of Henry Armstrong wasn't suited for the Olympic Games. Then his professional debut, he was knocked out in the 3rd round. But look at the accomplishment from that point on. Look what he have done. Look at the men he was in there with. Aldi Spaulding 6 times. You know who Aldi Spaulding was? He was in there with baby Aris Menzie. He was in there with Luther Slugger White, Al Bunny Davis, Mike Belois. These names you don't quite recognize. He was known as the Bronx Spider, but he could fight. Jimmy Larkin, Sefrino Garcia, who we defeated in 1938. And one last thing on that, and I'll go to the next question. 1938, when he defeated Sefrino Garcia, Garcia was ranked number 1. Philly Zivik was ranked number 2. Charlie Burley was ranked number 3. Armstrong defeated Sefrino Garcia. Philly Zivik would now move down to number 1. But Charlie Burley would lose to Fizzy Zivik. And so he was bumped back to number 3. I'm going to tell you something. He had a manager by the name of George Moore. George Moore was from the United Kingdom. And he suggested that Ernie Rudrick, who was ranked number 6, get an opportunity. So in 1939, Ernie Rudrick got a shot, not Charlie Burley. And I want to share those kinds of stories with you in the next segment. When we do, I want to do a complete history, a total breakdown of the Black Murders Row. First wave, second wave, and third waves. And I'm going to tell you some things you've never heard before.
Yes, sir. I got a question coming up from Bruce Goals, our channel member, in the chat.
Shout out to Bruce Goals.
Salute to you, Bruce Goals. He says, was Schmeling punished for losing to Lewis by Hitler?
Yes, he was. He was put in 1952. He was put in as a German airman. He had to fight in the military. He had to peel potatoes. And as a matter of fact, he had to jump out of airplanes for his age. He was not welcome back on it. Well, the Hindenburg had already burned up by that point, but he wasn't welcome when he came back. So yeah, he was definitely punished.
Wow, that's something that we haven't heard much on, stuff like that. Great question, Bruce Goals. Great question. We have another question coming in from the Queen Lala D. She says, question, Scrap, is the Wilder hate anywhere close to what Ali faced from the boxing world? Stormy, you can answer too. I'll let Scrap answer it.
Is Wilder's hate anywhere close to Muhammad Ali?
To the hate that they had for Ali during his time, where I guess when he had just become Ali, and then they wanted to draft him, and he went against that and all of that.
Okay, right. Deontay Wilder's hate is very, very strong. Very strong. It's not quite like Ali, because Ali was a little bit different because of he was the first fighter, black fighter, who spoke up. Now, Jack Johnson did, but he didn't speak up for his people. Muhammad Ali did. Wilder speaks up for his people, but not during the course of history, where you had the movement going on and you had white people who just didn't recognize black people, period. It's different now, but the hate is very strong for Wilder, but not quite like Muhammad Ali. But that's a very good question. It's a very, very good thought. Good thought.
We have another question from the birthday man, Curtis Anderson, a.k.a. Kurt Sugar, a.k.a. our co-host for the Three Wise Men. He's
Absolutely.
saying, how good was Charlie Burley, Scrap?
I have Charlie Burley ranked in the top 10. Charlie Burley was not only good, he was great. He was one of the most avoided fighters in boxing history. Charlie Burley threw combinations beyond belief. He was way before his time, and that's why he was avoided. He had a couple of fights with Holman Williams, and I read in a memoir, Holman Williams said you couldn't beat Charlie Burley if you paid him and didn't accept any money, because Charlie Burley was that good. And he was in there with Oakland Billy Smith, Jack Chase. I mean, he was something else, man. Charlie Burley was a hell of a fighter. Very underrated, but he was something else. Now, he didn't defeat Ezzard Charles, but he defeated Archie Moore. And to defeat Archie Moore, you have to be a good fighter, especially during those days. Archie Moore was a great middleweight. Great question, Kurt. And shout out to Lala D. Thank you so much, Queen, for the question. And my brother Blue Scope.
So, Scrap, I have another question. I know
Yes,
we'll in the future be getting to Black Murderers Row and the waves, but who do you think from the first wave, let's just narrow it down, who do you think from the first wave of Black Murderers Row was the best?
Sam Langford.
I wasn't finished with my question.
The answer's going to be Sam Langford no matter what the question is.
Okay,
Go ahead,
all right. Just let me finish, please, because I want the
Go
people.
ahead, my brother. Go ahead.
No, because that's leading by example with the type of question I'm bringing to you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who was the best fighter in the first wave of Black Murderers Row that if they were given that opportunity to fight for a genuine world title could have reigned and been more of a recognized world champ in history? And you answered Sam Langford, but that was my complete question, because see, the fact that you're being denied that type of opportunity, it negates your place in history properly. And I raised that question because we're subtly seeing it again, Scrap. We're seeing it again. And I want our listeners to take heed of that, because legacy in professional sports is everything. Individual salaries can come and go, they can raise and fall. But what's even more outstanding and upstanding is the impact that you made on the sport and what legacy you leave behind? What was your mark? And so when a fighter wasn't given those opportunities, he's actually erased from the history by not being able to come through the door to surge through toward history. That was my point.
No, absolutely. And I was kidding with you. I knew I was going to let you finish the question.
Yeah.
But the answer was going to be Sam Langford, because he had 63 title defenses. Sam Langford technically won more than 5 colored heavyweight championship titles. He also won the black championship title. And a lot of people don't know that. He took on young Peter Jackson. And 1909, Joe Jeanette fought Sam McVeigh 3 times. But they were both 20-round draws, but the best one happened April 17th of 1909. That went 47 rounds, 32 knockdowns. You had Joe Jeanette, who went down 27 times. And Sam McVeigh couldn't breathe, literally couldn't breathe, basically having a heart attack. They put a paper bag over his head. They threw a bucket of water. And after a while, he said, "The hell with it." He gasped, but saying, "I can't breathe." That's how hard that fight was. Everything was broken, blood all over the place. And the thing is, Sam Langford faced Joe Jeanette 14 times. He faced Sam McVeigh 15 times. He was in a ring with Harry Wells 22 times. So you have to look at these things for what it is. He called everybody out. The twin Sullivan brothers, Jack and Mike. To answer this question this way, 1903, he fought Joe Gans, defeated Joe Gans, was for a 9-title lightweight championship bout. But then he would go in 1904, excuse me, and he would, I consider he beat the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott. But became a draw, title wasn't on the line, so he didn't win the welterweight championship belt. But then 2 years later, he would go up to the heavyweight division and he would take on Jack Johnson for the heavyweight championship title. He had broke his hand 2 months before. Not even 2, no, it was 3 weeks before. And he fought Joe Jeanette. Joe Jeanette used to knock out men in the street. He had over 100 street fights. He was a knockout artist. And 2 weeks before that Jack Johnson fight, or 2 to 3 weeks, I gotta double check, he fought Joe Jeanette. So it just goes to show you, he called out Jack Dempsey. And Jack Curran said, "Sam, we were not looking for someone that good." They created the light heavyweight championship division. Why? Because Sam Langford was knocking on the door. And Jack Root had nowhere else to go. So Houseman decided to create the light heavyweight division so he can get away from Sam Langford. This is fact. Sam Langford used to ride in the back of a wagon. They would put a burlap bag over his head because they didn't want certain fighters to know that he was actually the fighter that they had to face. He was that feared in the South and in the North. He fought in water moccasins, knee-deep water. He was something else. So he's not as appreciated as you would think he would be. You can't quite grasp, but he was a hell of a fighter. So yeah, that's the reason why I said Sam Langford, no matter what the question was.
Awesome. We got another question from our brother Kurt Sugar, and he says, most exciting fighter you ever saw?
Mine was Henry Armstrong. Again, here's a man who weighed 123 3/4 pounds. And he took on fighters, the way he was fighting them, ferociousness. Let me tell you about that featherweight division and why Henry Armstrong, in my opinion, is the most exciting that I've ever saw. George Dixon discovered shadowboxing. And Kid Chocolate became the second black fighter to win a featherweight championship. He was from Cuba. But because of his mastery, the slick hair and the way he popped the jab and everything else, Henry Armstrong was inspired to turn, well, at least to be a fighter, by Coco Kid, because the newspaper hit him in the leg as he was on a railroad. He used to work on the railroad. But he started shadow boxing 15 rounds before every fight because of George Dixon. And he would fight guys taller than he was, faster than he was. Baby Alice Menzie was a master boxer. So was Sefrino Garcia. Willie Joyce, all of them guys. So he was very exciting, was Henry Armstrong. Bo Jack as well. But you had many exciting fighters, many of them. But he was my most exciting fighter.
Okay, we got one from the brother Curtis Price out there. He says, out of all the black fighters, who was the most complete fighter?
Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson was the most complete. You see, the true definition of pound for pound was coined for Ray Robinson. You had Benny Leonard, you had Jim Jeffries and others. But it was coined officially for him because he was a fighter in the correct weight division, where he was as fast as the featherweights and as hard of a puncher as the heavyweights. And the 4 criteria in order for you to be a complete fighter, because that's what you're judged on. You got to be able to punch, clean punches. You got to have some form of defense. You got to be able to dictate the pace of a fight. The aggressive, effective aggressiveness. You got to have it all. Charisma and everything else, sell tickets. And Ray Robinson was the best. He knew how to hook off a jab. He would throw 5 punch combinations at you, and each one hit a vital area. He would feint you into a position to get you to have to, you had no choice but to defend in that position that he got you in, only to be set up with another punch. His footwork was impeccable. His combinations was unquestionably great. He was a thinking man's fighter. He fought them all. 5-time middleweight, 1-time welterweight. He's been down, knocked out of a ring, got back in the ring and won the fight. So he showed the grit that he had. Was in there with Carmen Basilio and Gene Foma. Didn't beat Joey Max in 52 because he ran out of gas. 110 degrees heat. He was a hell of a fighter, was Ray Robinson. I had the pleasure of meeting him on 2 separate occasions. And he spoke to me about that Burley fight, and I'll talk to you when we do the Black Murderers Row. When I do that Black Murderers Row show, you're going to be shocked. And if you're going to question me, then I don't know what to tell you. Because I'll talk to you about that when we talk about it.
Okay, we got another great question from the Queen Lala D. She says, Scrapbook, if you had to personally form a murderer's row of Cubans only, name at least 4, but feel free to give more.
Black Bill, Kid Talkley, Nino Valdez, Luis Ortiz, Bill Jackson, 4. So that's 4. That's 5, but 4.
Awesome. See, I think that people think like, only the names that they know, but there are so many that just didn't get the notoriety for the very same reason of which I spoke earlier when I asked my question in depth, So legacy means a lot, man. If you don't get the opportunity to come inside for the party, nobody knows whether you can dance or not, huh?
Yeah, you had a fighter by the name of Theophilo Stevenson. And Stevenson. He was as good as it gets, but he was an amateur star. and he just couldn't get the breaks to get out to fight as a professional, to be a seasoned professional because of the Cuban regime, But I didn't list him because of that reason, but he was something else. He was something. He was a very, very good Cuban fighter. Ray Leonard in the Olympic Games. He fought a very good Cuban fighter. You had some really good ones, but those are the four that I would list for this topic. Thank you, Lala.
Great stuff, man. Great stuff. Let's see. I think I saw another one up there. Okay, this is from Rashid Rourke. He says, Stormy B-Man and Scrap, who was the earliest boxer to be able to switch from orthodox to southpaw and vice versa, effectively in a fight where it was noted?
Charles Kid McCoy. He had a thing called the corkscrew punch. And what he would do, almost like Stanley Ketchel, he would throw his right hand in a way where he would shift over to southpaw position. And he was very successful in that. But Charles Kid McCoy would wind up fighting Jack Root for the light heavyweight championship recognition. And then George Gardner would wind up fighting Marvin Hart. And when them two fought in 1903, they would beat their fighters, and then Jack Root and George Gardner would meet each other. But Charles Kid McCoy, he was a middleweight champion, but he tried to become the light heavyweight champion by fighting George Root. And he tried that Jack Root. But he tried that technique. It didn't work with Jack Root. So he didn't move any further than that. But he was the first in my years of studying fighter to switch from orthodox to southpaw and back fluently with the corkscrew punch.
Okay, that's great. There was another question that I had here. Forgive me, the chat jumped up for a second. Goodness, it moved kind of quick on me. No, I saw the question. It was okay. From Jeff Smith out there in the chat says, how good could Bo have been?
How good would Riddick Bowe be? How good could he have been?
Yes.
Oh, he could have been a very good fighter. He was a good fighter. He could have been better had he been more productive in his personal life. And, Riddick Bowe, I remember, believe it or not, I remember when Riddick Bowe was a lightweight. At one point in time, he was an actual lightweight. And he was, he was a comedian in that gym. And he would do impersonations of Howard Cosell and Ali and everybody. He laughing all the time and clowning. But when he got in the ring, he was serious. But he still had that little boy in him. And once he won the title, and he did that tour in Africa and other places, something happened to Riddick Bowe, and he built that kitchen in his bedroom. But he was a very good fighter, an outstanding fighter, an unbelievable inside fighter for a big man. He knew all the tools to use at critical moments. You look at the Holyfield fight, 10th round was unbelievable, the first fight. But Riddick Bowe was a very, very good fighter. I knew him for many, many years. He used to be called Sugar Bear before he was Big Daddy. And he used to have this part in his hair that was a rut. He put dye. But he was something else in them amateurs, man. He was on a national amateur boxing team with Michael Moore and Kevin Kelly and Michael Carbajal, many others. And this is before the Olympics in '88, but he was something else. Very good fighter. He would have been very good had he taken it more serious, but he was a very good fighter, as he was.
People are blown away by your responses because you give such detail.
I see a question. Thank you. By my brother Bruce Goals. He wants to know the first fight that I actually went to. I always struggle remembering this, but it was actually Alexis Arguello and Ernesto Marcel. I've been to 500 fights. I'll be going to my last fight. I'll have my last fight coming up, but I've been through over 500 fights. I've seen, I'm not going to say I've seen them all, but I've seen all the big fights. All the big fights you can think of, I was there. And if I don't get a chance to enjoy anything else in life, that I can take away from the pleasure I had going to those fights. They were not easy. Traveling is not easy. But I've been through so many of them. I missed Ken Norton and Larry Holmes. And I know Bruce asked me about that before. 1978, when I went to Yaki Lopez and Matthew Shah Muhammad, I had to give up a fight. And that was the one that I gave up, the Larry Holmes and the Ken Norton. And also the McAveen fight, with the rematch with Yaki Lopez and Matthew Shah Muhammad, as well as the Ernie Shavers and Larry Holmes fight. That fight happened in 78, and Spinks and Ali. But I did get to see, in 78, I did get to see Benny Briscoe, as well as Marvin Hagler, and also, I also saw Eddie Mustafa Muhammad and I can't think of his name, James Scott in prison. I got to see that. I went to Norway to see that. So I've seen so many fights, man. Alexis Arguello and Aaron Pryor, the first one. Oh man, I can't even. So many fights I saw. Then Little Red Lopez and Salvador Sanchez and Gomez, Bobby Chacon and Cornelius Boza Edwards, Bobby Chacon and Bazooka Lamont. I've seen them all. Always second row, always. I couldn't be more blessed. Hagler Mugabe, incredible. And the people that I met, it's as I look back, I can't even believe I met them. I met them all. Met them all before a lot of them passed away. So I couldn't be more blessed, man.
That's awesome, man. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our show. It's been an hour just that fast. We actually started a little bit before the hour, so it's been an hour and some change. But that's how it is when we get to listening to some real quality boxing history and conversation from Scrapbook. I would advise anybody that's out there to please, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to Scrapbook's channel, because the Museum of Forgotten Fisticuffs series is some of the best historical information that's available to us all. And Scrapbook is really, vigilant in his efforts when he puts his material out. See, sometimes I'm out there and I'm watching and checking out the material. He don't even know I be out there, but I be out there soaking it up. And I agree with everyone that says it. Scrapbook, you're a national treasure, brother. You're a national treasure. And I know that I appreciate what you do, the knowledge that you have garnered, and the fact that you have no trouble coming here on the airwaves to share the history with us the way that you do.
I appreciate it. I just want to remind everyone, if I stumble, all of this is at the top of my head. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm going to say. I know the topic. I just go. Once Stormy says go, that's the first time I'm actually thinking about what I'm going to talk about. That's the way I do it. It's the only way I could really do it. And I want to appreciate everyone for giving me an opportunity. Sometimes I might have to think a half a second to get out what I'm trying to say, to match with what I just finished saying, but it's all at the top of the dome. So thank everybody. I do appreciate it. And this is what I've always done my whole life. I've been involved in this thing my whole life. And like I said, I saw Ezzy Charles, 8 years old, I guess it was. I can't remember. That was 75. I've never personally met. I didn't know who he was. Couldn't appreciate him at the time until my dad told me later on who he was and what he did, what accomplishments he made. But I saw him in a wheelchair. He was sponsoring muscular dystrophy, and he had a belt around him. And from that point, I've seen all the champions in the past. I never met Joe Louis. He passed in 81. But I've seen them all, met them all. autographs. I have all the pictures with them and everything else. And conversations, did a lot of interviews with them. So I couldn't be more blessed. I do appreciate it.
And I would like to add this about Charles Scrap, because as I read up on him when we did our show on him, when you saw him, he had been suffering from ALS. So,
yeah, Lou Garrett, right?
That's what he was suffering from and eventually passed from. So
yeah.
That's what that was with Charles.
Got you. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, man. Yeah, he was in good shape. Only his head was moving around, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw him I didn't know who he was, you know. But I'm glad I got a chance to see him in retrospect. And that beautiful belt he had. They had the belt strapped around his chest. And everybody, he was like a god there. It was incredible. The light, you know, they had the light bulbs with the camera flashing like crazy. Everybody was all at him, and I just didn't know who he was. And I wish I could have appreciated him then.
Yeah, and that's, you know, again, see, when you start coming up with some of this, you know, information and everything, that's what makes me double down, you know, because it's not like, oh, I want to try to challenge what you know. It's like, no, it's like you giving me a reason to like look into some things that I wasn't abreast of. And then it's like, hey, you know, I'm proud to have been put on that track, because then it'll make me, you know, look toward other avenues as well regarding other fighters and fights. So again, it's I can't state enough, you know, how much of a you know, a treasure that is to have someone to put us in that type of situation where we can look things up for ourselves and everything. But there was a question in the chat that I wanted to ask, and I think it was Rashid Rourke. If it wasn't Rashid Rourke, I apologize for forgetting who it was, because it was a moment ago. Is there any available footage on Charlie Burley?
Yes, there's footage on YouTube. He's fighting Jimmy Bivens. He's fighting Lloyd Marshall. He's fighting Joe Walcott. He's fighting Joe Louis. He's fighting Pat Valentino. He's fighting a couple guys. Rocky Marciano twice in 1954. Both of those fights are available. So there's a lot of fights that are available of Charlie. You said, is it Charles or Charlie Burley?
Charlie Burley.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm thinking of Eddie Charles. Yes, the only fight that they have on film is with him and Oakland Billy Smith. And there's some clips of that fight, but that's the only one that I know of, is the one with Oakland Billy Smith. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Eddie Charles. Y'all must have been saying, what is he talking about? Yeah, no, Charlie Burley and Oakland Billy Smith. Oakland Billy Smith wound up becoming the California State Light Heavyweight Champion as well. He was a pretty good fighter. But that's the only footage that I've seen with Charlie Burley.
Okay, man. So I put your link in the chat there, Scrap. So anybody would like to subscribe to your channel, I put it in there. Sometimes I forget to do that when I'm doing these other things, but I was able to do it while you were talking. So yeah. But yeah. Any final thoughts? Any final words?
Well, I'm more than blessed for you giving me this opportunity. And I always say that because it's true. And I want to thank everyone. My sister Lala D, my brother Curtis Anderson. Happy birthday to him. Amazing, amazing human being he is. You know, of course, Bruce Scholes and Rashid Walk, St. Cruzin, The Finest, Curtis Price, Jose Diaz. I mean, those who I forget, please forgive me. But you know, everybody, man. I want to give a shout out to Hardline Boxing, Random Acosta Thoughts, A. Sims. I want to shout out my brother, you know, BFTB, Drew Titan. You know, everybody that supports me, everybody that shows the love. I want to thank them very much. And like I said, we get the next show in here is going to be the entire history. We've never heard this before. of the Black Murderers Row, and I'm just going to throw a lot of gems. I can't hold back information. I may as well just put it out there. But like I said, I spoke to these brothers, Ray Robinson and Charlie Bill. There's things that guys who wrote books don't know because they didn't hear the conversation. So, I'll be more than happy to share a lot of information, no problem.
All right. So, well, that's it for this evening's historical boxing conversation with Scrapbook Boxing. I hope that everyone that's out there had a chance to enjoy, and you guys can feel free to show a little love for Scrapbook too by hitting that super chat, because that's what this man is out here working to provide something for you guys. Show a little love sometimes. There's respect in that. It's not a shakedown, but it's a throwdown of the opportunity for invaluable information that you're just not going to get anywhere else. So remember that and support the brother and Curtis Anderson for what they do. As I've said many other times, I bring up the rear, but these two men, they're invaluable. You guys need to really show that love. I know I've seen people show love to a lot of other stuff out there that I'll only refer to as foolishness. That's my word. But there's nothing foolish about what happens when these two brothers do the things that they do in providing boxing content. And I know earlier this evening we had some trolls that came through here, and I say salute to Mr. Shelton for quickly acting, and Bruce Goes. But please, when you see trolls come to this channel, take care of that business, because as Big Homie Coop says, class is in session, so pay attention. We don't want that. And I left the chat open because this is Scrapbook's show. This is not my show. This is Scrapbook's show. So I'm not trying to hinder or limit his audience. But when you see someone come in here like that, disrespectful, please handle that business. That's the reason that you have wrenches. You don't have wrenches just so you can see your name in blue lights up there. You have wrenches so you can support the efforts of the channel and what we do here. So please understand that, and it's a team effort. There's people that came in here. Out of everyone that tuned into this show, we had 59 people to give us the thumbs up and 3 morons give us thumbs down. And I know who those morons are, but they don't belong here anyway. I don't know why they're not fishing in the alley in garbage cans, because there's nothing of garbage about what Scrapbook does here. That just shows you the ignorance, the bias, and prejudice that still exists today. And that's why we have someone that's historical that can talk about these things and put it down in the correct manner. So always learn to show respect. You know what I'm saying? I don't troll people. I don't go to channels and troll. And I don't allow it here. But like I said, this is not my show. This is Scrapbook's show. And I demand that respect be shown for this man for what he does. Salute to the Queen Lala D out there in the super chat. She says, thanks, Scrapbook. You're fantastic. And the 3 wise men of boxing. And she's giving 3 hearts up there. And salute to the brother Curtis Anderson out there in the super chat saying, Scrapbook, he's giving you the boxing gloves with the sparks. Appreciate those for both of you guys and ladies, Kurt and Lala D. And those super chats will be forwarded to Scrapbook Boxing. So, but this is another edition of Historical Boxing Conversations with Scrapbook. This is Stormy B, man. We're going to sign on off for now. There's other people going live, and I know our numbers will dwindle down anyway. But I appreciate everyone that came out, showed support for the show, and those who also gave to the super chat this evening. So for my man Scrapbook, this is Stormy B. We out of here. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Peace. Lala and Curtis, salute. Thank you.
Salute to the brother Dre Finest out there in the super chat. He says, much love and respect, my brother Scrapbook, the best that ever did it. You dig? Appreciate you, Dre Finest.
Shout out to Dre Finest. Thank you, my brother. Actually, Lala did, yes, I did go to the Camacho Rosario fight. Mike Tyson knocked out Reggie Owens on that undercard. Unbelievable fight that was. Peace.